Welcome to a special edition of Tales from the Fandom, where we're just going to talk about one fandom today, which is Final Fantasy. Next year, it turns the big 3-0, so it's going to start having a midlife crisis at some point in the next 10 years after, I imagine. And I am joined by a repeat guest who not only did her own episode, but has been featured on the Ghostbusters episode and the Star Trek 50th anniversary special. Chelsea, welcome back
Hi,
to
thank you
Tales
for
from the
having
Fandom.
me back. I'm always happy to come.
And I'm always happy to have you. And I brought you back because Final Fantasy 15 has come
Yeah,
out to the consternation or joy, depending on where you fall, of gaming fans everywhere.
yes,
And you have some very distinct views on Final Fantasy 15, which I'll we'll get to at some point.
yes,
But I mean, it's been almost 30 years,
it
and
has.
we're close enough in age where I feel comfortable in telling you I remember getting my first Nintendo
Of
system,
course.
and
I remember my
and I,
first Game Boy, my first Nintendo, my first PlayStation, my first Sega Genesis.
well, we lived in Canada when the
Oh,
Nintendo came out, so I remember that we drove across the border to New York. We routinely did that every couple months
oh
because
my
my dad
goodness.
was in the military, and so we'd go to the closest military base to go grocery shopping for like a month or two of supplies. And we picked up the Nintendo on the state side because I think it was about $150 cheaper. And eventually, one of the games that came out that I picked up, I don't think I got it right away, but was Final Fantasy, the
Yes, the
original Final Fantasy,
original.
the
I
original where
remember
you
the
got to
original.
choose your party.
Yes, exactly. And they were the elements, like the earth, fire, wind, water, the light warriors.
Absolutely.
Ah, good times. That was one of
So,
the first games I got. You got Super Mario and Duck Hunt and Zelda, and then I got Final Fantasy, and I had no idea. I had no idea that this was going to become like a lifelong thing, and yet here we are,
right, and
30 years later.
it's not only like a lifelong thing, but it's such I think the games are just such an influence on certain parts of your life. Like you hear the music
Ah, the
and it takes you back. You see a black mage, it takes you back.
It's so true. There was those giant Final Fantasy concerts they do, and it's amazing that the whole orchestra it gets sold out every time they do it, and I'm like, yes, I would go to that. I would listen to that concert because I've watched it on YouTube, and I'm like, this is so emotional. I am so
Right.
emotional right now. And I was talking to my friends recently about I love all the games, but I will say that I find that 10 has the most emotional music for me. Um,
Hmm.
the Xanarkin theme, Xanar, I can never say it right. That theme, the main theme, like I hear the first few notes and I get emotional. Like it's just so beautiful, and that's one of the things Final Fantasy is famous for is for their exceptional music.
Absolutely. Their music, I mean, even going back to the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo
Yes.
era, those 8-bit and 16-bit, musics that they were pumping out are still phenomenal to this
They are
day.
still great. I definitely, because in the concerts they do Celis's theme song or the opera. And
Hmm.
I was like, I loved it. It's beautiful. But I'm like, I really love the NES. I love the original 8-bit one.
Right.
It was just so ridiculous, but it was beautiful too.
Right, it's just like when they do the re-releases like on the DS or the 3DS or whatnot, and you see the characters and you're like, but that's not my character.
Yeah.
My character was like a little pixelated
It is.
character.
And I would love the older Final Fantasies to be done again just because it would be really fun to play them with full graphics, but that doesn't mean that my heart wouldn't still remember them as they were, they're still. But I hope this is probably impossible, but I hope that if Final Fantasy VII does well with its re-release, they'll consider doing the other games because they already have the games, just reboot them.
Right.
you have 4 and 5 and 6 like that people have never seen even close to this. Like I wouldn't reboot 8, 9, 10, obviously, because
Hmm.
they're all decent graphics. Like 7, I can kind of see it's kind of blocky, but like 5, 4, 5, 6, like that would we need to have those in modern day. They would be amazing.
Now let's go over the games that you've played. Final Fantasy the original, yes or
Yes,
no?
yes,
Okay. We'll stick to the U.S. numbering. Final Fantasy 2, which is 4 in Japan.
yes.
Okay. Final Fantasy 3, which is 6.
I love Final Fantasy 6. It's my favorite.
Okay. Okay. Final Fantasy 7,
Yes.
8,
Yep.
9,
Yes.
10,
Yes.
10 2.
Yes.
Okay. 12,
Yes.
13.
I did, but I never finished it. It's the only Final Fantasy I've never finished.
And obviously, like I said, you're playing 15 right
Yes,
now.
I am. Yeah.
And for me, I did 1,
Hmm.
2, which is
Yeah.
4. Uh, Never played 3, which
What?
I still I tried to figure this out because my best friends in high school were playing 3 at the time it came out, and I don't know if I had switched to a Sega at the time
Yeah.
and had no Super Nintendo. I think that was most likely it because I remember uh, being really into like Sonic and some
I
other
love
of the Sega
Sonic.
games.
Yeah. I
So
can't
I think
believe that though, because 6 is my favorite, obviously. It's my
you know
baby. Like
it is on my schedule to play because it's something that I've always wanted to play. I've played 7,
Mhm.
I played 8 but didn't finish. Played 9 and loved it. 10 is my second favorite because my first favorite is 2 with Cecil and Kane
Yeah.
and Rydia. Played 10 too. Played 12 but never finished it. I didn't like the battle system
Yeah, that was an iffy one.
and then never played 13. And obviously I haven't played 15 at this point either.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend. 'Cause obviously, I've been talking pretty actively about 15, as you know, and one of my friends was talking about 13, and we were laughing because it's the only one I've never finished. And she said, I remember when you told me you couldn't finish, and I tried to summarize the game for you so you didn't have to play it, and I couldn't find the words. She's like, I was confused just trying to explain to you the whole game and the ending. And I'm like, okay, well, that game ended up to be a mess. And I was like, it had to be because I love this series and I could not get through it. I mean, I thought the design was beautiful. I liked the characters. It's just, it got so muddled. And I didn't like the fighting system there either. And I was just like,
Hmm.
I can't do it. But it was like, yeah, it's pretty indicative that somebody was like, I don't even know how to explain to you what happened in this game.
What's interesting for me is that I always find that I enjoy the ones that are more medieval or fantasy
Yeah.
based, like 2, 3,
Hmm.
9, 12, even though I didn't like the fighting system, 10. They're all steeped in more of that fantasy genre
As
rather
opposed,
than
yeah,
technology.
like
I mean, granted, you're
steampunk.
flying it like you're flying in like the space whale in 2,
Yes, it's
but like
different.
that's totally different than say like
7 or 8.
7 and 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the steampunk 7 and 8. It's so funny because I everyone is obsessed with 7, and I think that's because when it came out on PlayStation, it was like such a big deal.
Hmm.
It was the big game, the one that like people really remember that
I bought my
system.
I bought my PlayStation for that game.
Exactly. So I feel like we had been talking about before this, is that it's the first game that you love or the first game you play is the one that'll probably always be your favorite. And like 6
Right.
was the one for me that emotionally mattered the most. And it wasn't the first one I played, but I think a lot of people's love of 7 is that I like 7. I own the movie. I love the game. I'm gonna get the new one, but it's certainly not my favorite or probably not even top 5. And that's not to say I don't love it. I don't have that emotional connection other people did to it. So, but I will say that everyone still knows that 7 did have one of the moments that actually shocked me in games.
What moment is that? And you can spoil it
Oh,
because,
and
at this point.
when Eris died.
Right. That was
Or
a big
Eris,
shocker right
yes.
there.
Oh, it was. I was legitimately shocked. And I remember actually being sitting in my room and going, "What?" I probably screamed. I might have screamed because that scene is so well done too. It's so creepy and like it's so tense. Like the music's kind of quiet in that one moment
Hmm.
and you just see him come flying down. I'm like, no, 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 no. And then you're like, she could get better. She's okay. And as you know, there are still people to this day that like pretend or think that there's a way in to like get around her death and still have her play in the
Right.
game. But it's not true. You can't. She's dead. It's over.
Right. They even talk about how there's certain areas where there's like a spot for her to like appear in, but obviously she's not there.
Yeah,
And
exactly. And I mean, she's as dead as you can get, which is, she's still part of the life stream with Zach, so that's okay. It's not the worst thing, but I do remember like actually going, "What?" But six, I think it did that even better, which is probably why it stuck with me. Is I'm gonna spoil it again here too. Six is the only game that they legitimately lose to the bad guy. Like
right.
they really hardcore lose. Not like one battle. Like he actually succeeds in what he wanted to do and breaks the earth. And I remember playing that because you're like, oh, I'm up to the boss battle. I'm going to defeat him and save everything. You're like, oh, no, everything's destroyed. And like 75% of the people are dead and everything went wrong. And I just remember as a kid, that concept was fascinating to me. I was 10 at the time, and I just had never imagined a story where they didn't win. And they did eventually win, but it was like at a really high cost. And
Hmm.
that kind of seriousness is one of the things I love about Final Fantasy. Like they never treat you like children. They expect children to be able to handle these things. And, a 10-year-old going, "Oh, well, everyone just died." And being able to handle that. And they trust that their audience can take it and we can, but it's just it's good that it's made for children or young people, but they definitely take themselves seriously when it comes to
Right.
good storytelling.
Yep. My favorite, I mean, your favorite is
Yeah.
six, and I'm coming in a few years before that with four,
Mhm.
and that was always like the sleepover game
Yes.
that we would play. And there were always tense points because in four, I'm not sure how it is with six, there were certain save points.
Yeah.
And once you started getting into the game,
They
there
became
were
fewer
times
and fewer.
fewer and far between, or you're having to backtrack.
Yeah.
And you really like it's I remember staying up so late sometimes because we'd have to get to that save point. I mean, you can't leave the game
No,
running
you
because you never know if
can't.
something happens with like the random encounters. And I remember like that was always the thing, like us playing into the night, into the morning, like the whole weekend would be that. And like I was telling you before we started recording, the key moment of that game that I remember is when the party is in the Dwarven Kingdom and they're trying to like stop the bad guys, and
Yeah.
my whole party was almost wiped because we like at that point you're not grinding
Yeah, or
levels,
not.
you're playing the game to have fun and enjoyment, and everyone's down except one person. And all of a sudden, the Mist Dragon shows up. Rydia comes and rejoins your party, and we're yelling at the TV because we can't believe that Rydia's back. And
Yes.
it was amazing. Between that and there's a certain encounter later, which messed me up for like a while, where it's this wall, and the wall
Oh
keeps moving
no.
towards you,
No.
and what happened was like that's a hard
Yes.
dungeon, I remember.
Oh God.
And everyone had died. I didn't have any like Phoenix Downs to bring them back. The only character that was still alive was Kane.
Yes.
And if you remember, after that battle, as you're leaving the dungeon, Kane betrays
Yeah, and
you,
he takes the crystal, doesn't
takes the
he?
crystal, leaves, and so then at the next random encounter,
Oh,
all my
everyone.
guys are dead,
Oh
and the game is
no. Oh
over
my
until my last save
God.
point.
That's so terrible, but it's so accurate.
But that game, man, that was my
That
jam back
game's
in the
great.
day.
I love Rydia. She's like one of my favorite characters. I always had fondness for summoners. I don't know what it is. I just always like magic users, to be honest. So summoners were kind of my jam, even though now when I play games, I tend to play warriors because I'm the person like runs into fights and just hits things until they die, which is what I've
Right.
been doing in Final Fantasy 15, which is one of the few games, the new battle system allows you to be that person, which is nice for once that I could just be like, okay, I'm just gonna button mash and kill everyone. It's been working, so I'm like, okay. But I really love the summoners. The Final Fantasy is just such an emotional thing, and I don't feel like people understand unless they really play it. And Conan O'Brien did a Clueless Gamer about Final Fantasy 15, and
Hmm.
he hated it, like hated it. He said this is an aggressive waste of my time. And it was so funny, but I'm like, he's gonna hate it because you need to have the RPG head for this because he's like, why are we going on all these stupid side missions? Like, of course, somebody who's just used to playing because he's played other games, but like Tomb Raider, like Call of Duty, he's used to those games. So like it's instant gratification. And he's going, why are we off in the desert hunting these people and asking them questions? And
Right.
like, because it's Final Fantasy and that's what you do.
Like generally you go in with the assumption with these newer games that the first 10 to 20 hours is all basically like tutorial.
Yeah, exactly. And he's just used to like Assassin's Creed, so he was like, I don't understand. Why am I doing this side plot about a wedding dress? And I'm like, because that is the game. And of course, you're not going to like it because you hate games and like you can barely tolerate the more active, exciting games. But it just made me laugh because I'm like, there are a lot of reports that 15 they designed hoping to attract new players who might be more interested in games like Call of Duty or Gears of War. And I can see that, but I also would like to remind them that it's not really going to work
Right.
because they're not Call of Duty. It's still an RPG. It's still flat out. The battle system is different, but you're still going to have a lot of time for hunting down, hunting creatures and random encounters, and that's the good stuff. But you have to have the taste for that to really like it.
Absolutely. Now, since we're on 15, let's go ahead and start talking about that game. That game has been in generally in the creative thing. I think I read at last point like it was 10 years in the making, give or take.
Yes, it took 10 years, and
And
I don't know how it took 10 years, but
well,
it took 10 years.
I know that because I read up on some stuff before we started, and they were kind of spinning off Final Fantasy like to have this whole like joint games being in the same universe type
Yeah.
thing. Like 13 was kicking it off, and 15 was supposed to be like an indirect sequel, or
Yes.
like it was supposed to be like versus 13.
Yep.
And then they changed it, which I think that's the big thing is that they had changed where they were going with that game to making it a standalone game, which then they had to redo whatever they had to redo.
Well, and they also have an anime and a movie that is a prequel to the game, which is one of the things that made me really irritated because I had heard like vaguely about it, but like I assumed okay, that's good extra stuff you could do if you wanted to, but I didn't assume that the game required you to really know those things before going in. But I have to tell you, I'm not finished with the game, but I'm a good chunk in, and they don't explain anything.
Really?
it feels like they expected you to watch these things, to watch the anime, to watch, and several of my friends who are into it are like, well, did you watch the anime? Because then you get the backstory of how they're all friends and how this whole thing. And I'm like, I shouldn't have to watch that. The game
That
should explain it to me.
exactly. Like that should not be a require. You should not have a requirement of, oh, you should watch the anime or whatever before you play the game, unless number one, you're going to package it with the game to begin with.
Exactly. And I definitely was like, well, what about people who didn't even know that exists? Are they just gonna, that's what happened? I mean, I knew it kind of existed. I didn't know it was that important because I kept
Mhm.
saying, like, I don't, this game, like, I don't know anything about the characters. They've expressed no personality or past that I can connect with. I don't know what this world is like. They're like, oh, well, you should watch this. I'm emotionally connected to them because I know all this stuff about them. Like, this is what the game is supposed to be. Like,
Right?
why do I have to watch 3 hours of material before I play the game in order to care about anything in the game? That's madness to me.
Now, how many hours have you sunk in so far?
I'm not that far. I'm only like 15 or 18
15?
hours. 15.
Okay,
It's
so
like 50 hours total. So I'm not,
50
yeah,
hours.
I'm
Okay,
not
so
like,
you're like a third, give or take.
yeah, enough that like story has happened, but I'm still like, you guys still haven't even, I don't know anything. Like, it's a good thing I went back and watched the anime because I wouldn't
Okay.
know anything about this if I don't. They don't really try. It's very bizarre. I think they just really wanted everyone. They clearly put in a lot of effort to make the anime and to make the movie, and they look great, and the voice acting's great, and like I can see how much work they put into it, which might also be part of why it took so long. But I also think that it's ridiculous that I have to um, watch that in order to feel anything about the story.
Absolutely.
Bizarre.
Now, now 15 is back to being more of a modern game, correct? Not
Yes.
not not a fantasy setting. It's more modern
Yeah. Yeah,
technology,
there's like
modern
a
stuff going on.
car. There are carports, there are like modern looking cities. Like there are several cities that like, maybe a fantasy spin, but they look like real cities that you would live in. Like I think one looks very close to Venice. Like it looks like it was designed off of Venice and it's beautiful. But yeah, even though they have like medieval weapons and I don't know, but it definitely is more. I would even call it no steampunk. Okay, that is a good word for it. Sorry, I'm thinking about the enemy, and um, they have these giant ships that come in with these soldiers, and they do look exactly like steampunk ships.
Okay.
So it does kind of look like that. I would say it's closer to that than fantasy for sure. There's like a
Oh.
car. The car is like the main thing you do in that game.
Now, for the battle system, is it more along the lines of, say, 12, or is it a throwback to like 10 or the earlier games where it just goes in order?
Well, it's no, there's no turn-based. It's open world fighting, so it's a lot more like something like Assassin's Creed.
Okay.
So you go up to enemies and you get to just attack any enemy you feel like. You just click the button, start attacking them and fighting, and your party does their own thing. You can, as the fight's going, they teach you how to do certain like, okay, I know this person has a like two-handed weapon that if I press this button, he'll like cleave a bunch of things around us and this person has a gun, so if I do this, he will, somebody's head will explode or something. So mostly it's just you hitting buttons and fighting and spinning. You can, roll away if bad things are happening to you, and then
Okay.
you can also like your people just kill until you tell them exactly if you want to use your special abilities, but otherwise they do their own thing and you do
Okay.
your own thing. And there are some like very interesting little abilities. Like you can, if you use something called like a warp point, you can restore health to yourself and get out of the battle if you're starting to get injured. And I mean, it's kind of like, here, let's make it as easy as possible for people. And once you finish um, your fights, you all of your health immediately is up again. And if you start to die, one of your team members will come over and give you health
Really?
without using a potion necessarily.
It almost seems as like when you're describing it, the thing that I can make it closest to, because I've not played Assassin's Creed or those open world games, but it sounds almost like Kingdom Hearts, where you've got
Yes.
Donald and Goofy running around doing their thing, and you're controlling Sora
Yes,
and, banging people
it's a
around.
lot more like Kingdom Hearts. Yes. And I think that's intentional. I'm pretty sure that some of the people who designed this game designed Kingdom Hearts as well. Yes, developed by the team behind Kingdom Hearts. So
Okay.
it's by the same group. I would say this is like a smoother fighting style. Not the Kingdom Hearts, but you know that occasionally Kingdom Hearts has like camera issues when you're
Mm-hmm.
in the air. This is very seamless. I've never had any camera issues. It's very smooth. I like the fighting system. I'm enjoying playing that a lot. I think it's fun. I like turn-based, so I wouldn't have a problem if it had still been that, but I think if they upgraded it to this, it wasn't a bad move, and so that's one of the positives I'd say. The graphics, of course, are as we expected, stunning. The music is great. The voice acting is great. Like it has all those elements. So it's just the story and the characters that are the problem.
Right. And that's the next thing is that I remember when it was being developed or when it took the turn from being versus 13 to them calling it 15.
Hmm.
I remember that there was an interview
Yes,
and is very controversial,
it was.
and I believe that it basically laid out the lines of we're not having any characters in your main party, as we would call
Yep.
it, that are
Women.
women. Now, I think before they made that transition to making it 15, that I don't know, I don't have my sources, so I could be wrong, but I remember that I thought there was one character out of the four that was going to be a woman, and then they changed the character.
Which is problem. I try to, the thing is, as I said, if this was any other game series, I think I would be more forgiving, not
Hmm.
much more forgiving, because the first woman that you have a conversation with and that you talk to for hours and hours, the only woman in the game, wears booty shorts, has cleavage down to there, and has no character or personality outside of a southern accent. And it's
Right.
weird as hell, and it's just not like Final Fantasy that that's the only thing I'm looking at. I was very shocked, and I kept expecting. And then, of course, the only two women, even now, that I have met really is the main character's fiance and one of his people's little sister. And again, they're like defined by their relationship to the male characters, not really by themselves. Like I know very little about them. And even the movie, which is more about his fiance, still starred a man that was in her, I believe that was one of her like bodyguards. So I'm like, what? Are they just non-existent? And like I said, I probably would be more forgiving, although not much because it's very frustrating. But I'd be more forgiving if it wasn't Final Fantasy, which is famous for have always having women in the party, almost always. Like as far back as four, we just talked about Rydia, which is two. Final Fantasy two had Rosa, had Rydia, had strong female, interesting characters. And we
Hmm.
have three, which is six, and like they, oh my god, like they're the best characters. Celis is one of my personal favorites, but they're all amazing. And you go to seven, you go to eight, nine, 10, 12, always mixed parties, mixed genders, mixed races, mixed ages.
Hmm.
And then you get this, and it's very weird. It's very weird to see it become this way considering the history of Final Fantasy. So I feel like because of my love of Final Fantasy, it is particularly annoying to me.
Like, when when I saw the previews and when I saw the start of the rollout from the information of what was going on, I was hopeful, like, well, maybe that they haven't revealed everything, or they're keeping some stuff in the back end. I mean, especially like going back to, say, like 10.
Yeah,
They're not telling the whole story of what's going on. You're
exactly.
finding out what's going
You
on.
don't find out what's going on with 10 until pretty late in the game.
Right. So, you're hopeful, and you're like, it can't just be like four guys driving around in a car doing whatever they're going to do in the game.
I
Because
mean,
again, not
there is a greater story, but it still is just the four guys going around fighting things. And I yeah, it's I kept somebody messaged me when I was like, "What the hell?" I posted a picture, which of the female character who is like hypersexualized, and
hmm
as you know, that's not a big Final Fantasy thing like that. And they said, "What did you expect?" He told you directly that this was going to be a game for guys about guys, and I'm like, I fooled myself. I believed because later on he was like, well, there will be women in it. They're just not in the party. And I'm like, okay, really? Because there's been maybe two women characters and they're not in the party and they're barely part of the game so far. And I mean, obviously, I am willing to change my mind if it turns out that they play incredibly big roles later on in the game. But
hmm
for right now, I shouldn't have to wait this long. I mean, think about the older games where right off the bat the party was mixed. And he said that he believed that if one woman was in the party, it would change the entire dynamic because men and women can't be friends. Because
Of course
in
not.
the past, in these games, they haven't had mixed gender teams that got along just fine, regardless of having different body parts. It was ridiculous, and it is ridiculous. And I'm not saying that I don't like the characters. I mean, I would say they're pretty. I don't know a lot about them. I will say that the anime did a really good job about introducing all of them, so I'm glad I watched it. I definitely know more about them. I care more about them, but I still, like, I don't feel any emotional connection. Not the way, like, I remember playing even 10. Like, I remember, I don't know, Titus or Titus, everyone says it differently. But
hmm
when he had his annoying parts, but still I was with him. You know, him and Orin and Riku were like the first characters in 10 that you played. And I, like, right off the bat, cared about all three of them. It
Oh
was
yeah.
nothing. It was easy. Like, it was as easy as breathing to like these characters. And I don't understand. Like, I've been playing 15, 18 hours, and I would not care if any of those characters died. Like, I would be like, okay, who are you going to replace in the party? Because I don't really care. Like, and that might be me, but I've heard it from a lot of people, and I actually don't think that is a gender problem. I don't think I would care more about them if they were women. I don't think I would. I think that they aren't doing a great job so far of making the characters distinct enough or making their situation emotional enough for me to connect to. Because this is like a mild spoiler. It's in the trailer, so it's not a big surprise. But they leave to do a arranged marriage, and then their home gets destroyed, and the king gets killed. And this is in the first few hours, and that's emotional. And I think that the main character, he's kind of a broody type, but you get feeling from him that his
hmm
father's dead and he's sad about that. But like, none of the other guys seem to have feelings on the matter. I'm like, their entire home was just destroyed. Like, what about their family? It's like, we know that one of their sisters got out, but like, did the other two have anyone they're worried about? And but you don't get anything from them. All of they're thinking about is the crown prince, which is their job. But it's just like, I how am I supposed to care? You're all like blank slates. I don't know. I wish that there had an emotional moment where any of them felt anything because the main character did. His father died. That's terrible. Like, good job, guys. But there are three other men in the party that all lost their home, and their home is under siege, and they're in a really terrible position, and none of them apparently have emotions about that.
I mean, even Kamari from Final Fantasy X had emotions at one point.
I know, right? And he had a tragic backstory, and I just, it's the weirdest experience for me because Final Fantasy is just so good normally at doing this. What have they done? Like, how did they go so wrong? And for me, it's wrong because you take away all the games, all the game aspects, the fighting, the visuals, the music, which are all awesome,
Hmm.
but Final Fantasy used to be amazing when it was the NES 8-bit, which means that it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the story and the characters. That is what Final Fantasy lives through. And for me, this is just it's a dead in the water kind of story. I'm willing to be. I mean, I'm willing to be pulled in. It just hasn't happened yet. I have growing indifference. And even with 13, which was a confusing mess, I still liked the sisters. I thought they were interesting. I was vaguely interested in their party members. And yeah, I don't know what to say. I think that somebody said they believe that it is trying to appeal to a wider audience because when the game starts, it says on the screen like this is a game designed for fans and new players. And I was like, okay. So right off the bat, like it's clear they're trying to get new audiences, which I respect and understand. As a game
Hmm.
company, you have to do that. But I feel like they're catering to a different audience right now, and it doesn't happen to be my audience.
Right. I almost think with the way that you were talking about it with the fighting system, I mean, if they're trying to attract the Assassin's Creed audience
Mm-hmm.
or a Call of Duty or that type of audience, I I don't see them committing the time into a game like
I know, in 50
a 50-hour
hours.
game where for some of these people that are playing the Call of Duty games, just to throw that one out, or Halo or whatnot, any of the first person shooter type games, they'll play the game, but they're playing it for
Multiplayer.
short bursts or multiplayer, or they're playing the storyline through and then they're going to jump into multiplayer. They're not going to sink
No,
50,
God.
60 hours into a storyline.
Exactly. And it's funny because I feel like that's where they're aiming. But like think about so I love all types of games. I love first person shooters. And I play them and I play Assassin's Creed and Uncharted and Call of Duty and Halo. So I love all these different types. But I think about if they're designing this the way that they did like original like Gears of War, for example. Um Gears of War eventually ended up having a decent storyline, and I eventually cared about the characters, but certainly in the beginning it was similar to this where it was like a four-man party and you don't really know much about them outside of like their catchphrases or like them trying to fight, and that's okay because that's the kind of game it is. But you didn't
Hmm.
get, I mean, eventually you got into like tragic backstories, and eventually in the game you felt more for them, and I'm hoping that's what's going to happen here. But I didn't play those games for the emotional weight that I expect from an RPG. I played it because it's fun and they're shooters, and I don't want a story that's longer than like 15 hours in those cases. But that's not what Final Fantasy is because that's not the kind of system they created. That's not the world they created. And it's just very bizarre. I feel like when you do play it, you're going to see exactly what I mean by this.
If they had called it something not Final Fantasy,
Yeah, it would
with
be different.
it would be for you, like for you, you be more accepting of it, or
I think it would. I think I would. I think I'd have a hard time still with like the characters and story. Not
hmm
not really, just because if you're gonna plunge, 50, 60 hours into a game. Like, I'd like to actually care about what I'm doing. That would be really nice. But, Kingdom Hearts, it's so, again, this is not necessarily the gender thing bothers me, but Kingdom Hearts, the playable characters are all men as well. Let's keep that in mind. Donald,
Right.
Goofy, Sora, Riku, all men. So it has really nothing to do with that. They have female characters in it, and they eventually, if you play all the side games, have lots of them. But it's not really about that. But you care more about I care about Kingdom Hearts. I love Kingdom Hearts. I cared about Sora from that first opening segment,
Right.
and that's how Kingdom Hearts is for me. But so this is very similar in fighting style, at least, and it has similar aspects to Kingdom Hearts. They just wanted this to be more serious, which it is. But so I think even if it was called something else, I wouldn't have bought it if it wasn't Final Fantasy. That's just the truth. I wouldn't have bought it,
Right.
which is why they did it. Smart. But I'm willing to change my mind. It's just right now I'm like, where are they headed with this? Like, why are they, is this what I'm going to expect from Final Fantasy? Because I don't know that I'm going to buy the next game if this is where it's headed, the direction it's headed.
Right. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where it is headed. I know that I'm not sure how well it did with the sales over in Japan because it's been out for, I guess, at least a week
It
earlier
did really
than
well. I think it was the fastest sold Final Fantasy. To be fair, though, I mean, times have changed, and that's much easier to buy this stuff than it used to be. But
right.
they sold very well. Everyone's and it's gotten overall positive reviews. Everyone has said the same thing I did. The combat's good, the music's good, the visuals good, the design's good. All of that's good. And the criticism is the same as mine, which is that the plot is kind of boring. But I've
Hmm.
been reassured that the ending is great, so I guess I just have to plunge 45 hours and wait for that ending before I really know how I feel about this game.
I remember reading a review earlier. I think it's probably last week or the week before, because this is not the only Final Fantasy game that's come out this year.
Yeah, I know.
They had the Worlds of Final Fantasy
Yes, I
come
saw
out,
that.
and someone said that there was two Final Fantasy games that came out in name. Only one of them is a true Final Fantasy
And it
game,
would be the other
and
one.
and it would be Worlds of Final Fantasy. And even though it's got like the chibi characters and the really unique like stacking system where
Yeah.
you stack like different characters on top of their heads or whatever to get different powers, they said that's more of a Final Fantasy game than 15.
I 100% believe it. I don't if they hadn't if this hadn't been Square and the name wasn't Final Fantasy, I wouldn't call this a Final Fantasy game. I mean, the
Mhm.
design is the only real thing that's like Final Fantasy because the fighting style's not and the character driven stuff is not so far and it's not really Final Fantasy, which I kind of get that they want to maybe try. There's no harm in seeing if another style works for them. I mean, it's been 30 years. Maybe they're feeling like they could try different things now. And I wouldn't want to like control that if that's where they want to go. It just doesn't mean that I'm going to be interested in it
Right.
because
Absolutely.
that's totally up to them. And I'm willing to go on this one, but if I don't like the end of this one, I'm probably not going to keep going. And I don't know, I just feel like this isn't a Final Fantasy game. Not the kind that I loved, but I do hope other people like it. So I don't want to rain on anyone else's parade. I want other people to enjoy themselves. I
Rain on People's Parade.
You must hate it. You must hate it. It's a terrible game and you're terrible if you like it. No, not at all. I mean, we Final Fantasy is a highly contested thing where people would be like, "You don't like 7, you're the devil."
Oh man, those are the days right
I
there.
know, right? And I like 7, but it's like, no, 7 is the best thing that's ever existed. I'm like, okay, that's going a little far. Like, heathen. I was okay, it's good, guys, but and of course I got a lot of flack for loving 8 because no one likes 8 except for some people, and I happen to be one of those tragic people who really likes 8. And it's just so funny to me because I like them all for different reasons, and I like 8 for reasons that are different than 7 or 10. So, but it is fun. The people have really intense points of view on these games,
Oh, definitely.
as they should. They're emotional.
They are, and like we've talked about, you stick with the ones that really connect with you.
Yeah.
That first game, or maybe even the second game, because for me, the original Final Fantasy didn't do it for me.
No, because it was really
But
basic.
Final Fantasy 2, that was where
Yeah.
you get those feelings, get those emotions, connections to everybody.
Well, I mean, the first one didn't have much of a story to speak. I mean, it was okay. I'm not going to say it wasn't a good game, but because I mean, I kept buying the games. So, but two is when they really delved deep into stories and characters and the world. And then from there, they just got stronger and stronger in terms of world building, in terms of design and their thought process of the whole game. So, it definitely like I feel like every game they're trying to just kind of up the ante a little bit, but like you
Hmm.
think about 10, like 10 was just amazing. And 6 is my favorite, but like I remember 10 as being in my head like it just hit me on every emotional level. Like it just knocked me off my feet, and I brought that system to um college with me. My parents bought it for me for Christmas. I played some of the game with my parents. Because I mean, it has a good voice acting and stuff. It was the first one they had like active voice acting for.
Hmm.
And we all watched it and they're like, wow, this is beautiful. This game is beautiful. I'm like, I know, it's really great. And so I went to college and my roommate was like, whatever about it. And then she started listening to it. And then she got super into the story and would be like, you're only allowed to level up while I'm in class. You have to wait for the story until I get back. And we had an amazing time. I mean, 10 was amazing in that way. Like, I feel like that is a good pinnacle of them having all of the visual aspects that are stunning, the music, the voice acting, so it was the first big voice acting, and then also having story and stuff. So I would say that 10 for me is like a groundbreaking moment. Not to say that the others aren't, but I feel like for them, that was like a turning point for their game, for their systems.
Absolutely.
And and the ending was, I mean, famous. It was beautiful, and I cry every time. And that's why I didn't really like Final Fantasy X too, but which was not the best idea they've ever had. And everyone was like, well, if you want an all girl party, why don't you play Final Fantasy X2? I'm like, well, if I wanted another shitty game, I guess I could play that.
Right?
Doesn't just because it's all gender either side doesn't make it a good game. Like,
Exactly. Like you don't need
hey,
to have, I mean, just give me the game with the good story and the characters.
exactly. And if Final Fantasy 15 turns out eventually the characters, the story, it all fits for me, then I won't give a crap about all of this other stuff. But it just hasn't done it for me yet, and I'm not 100% sold it will. But I totally understand how other people like it. I just really wish I didn't have to watch the freaking anime to like it.
Right.
That's really irritating. I mean, that's probably the thing that is sticking in my craw the most is that I have to watch something else before I play the game. What is that? That's nonsense. But I can't wait for Kingdom Hearts 3. That's all I can say because that's coming out soon and they at least seem to be respecting the old school ways.
Now, just before we end, I'd love to know what are, let's say, your top 5 of the Final Fantasy.
Oh my God. Well, 6 is number 1. 10 would be number 2 for sure. I would put I would put maybe 4 at 3, 8 at 4, and either 7 or 12 at 5. The
Okay.
thing is that I like all these games, so it's hard because it's like I like all of them. Feeling like ranking them is like saying I don't like the others, but I like all of them. But these are definitely in my head like Which ones would I want to replay? Oh, this is what this is the order I would like to replay them. What about you?
And for me, four is number
Yes,
one,
yes,
like automatically, and then 10 is number two.
yes.
And then it gets murky because I haven't played three,
You should.
so or six,
Yeah,
or
six.
how we've been flip flopping back and forth on the numbering, just like in Japan.
Everyone
Um,
is three is six and two is four. So you've
yes,
heard us use those numbers. This is what we mean by it.
I think definitely nine would probably be my third.
Yeah,
So four, 10, and then nine, because you the and nine I feel is very
it
underappreciated.
is. One of my friends, it's her favorite, and she never understands why more people don't love it. And I liked it. I can't say I loved it, but I really enjoyed it. I certainly liked playing the game.
Well, my thoughts on nine is number one, you had it came off of seven and eight, which are both very high tech
Yes,
type storylines, very mature, and then you're going you're not going backwards,
hmm,
but you're going different from what people have now grown up on
it's
with
true.
the PlayStation generation, and you're going back to this fantasy setting with
Hmm.
like almost not chibi characters, but
Childish.
they're very chibi-fied
Yes.
characters, and I think that was the big thing, is that the art style deviated so much and went
Yeah.
back to the place like us 80s people who did four and six and are like, oh, I love that.
Yes.
Or, seeing uh her name is escaping me right now, the main
Garnet.
character, Garnet dressed as a white mage,
Yes.
or
Oh,
seeing Vivi
Vivi
in
doing the
the black mage.
yes.
I mean, those are automatically like triggers for our memories growing up as kids.
Yeah, it definitely it makes me feel something. But it's interesting because Final Fantasy IX has a higher score from like reviews wise. Metacritic has it at like 94%. It's the highest score of the video Final Fantasy games on Metacritic. So technically everyone reviewed it well. It's
Right.
just I guess people don't like remember it well or don't
Hmm.
put it at top of their list. Like it was certainly a game they enjoyed, like me, but not necessarily a game that they loved. And that's probably what it is because I mean, it was a good game. There was nothing wrong with it. It was good in all the ways it should be good. And like you said, it was fun to go back to. And obviously, but 10 didn't have 10 was more fantasy based for sure. There
Hmm.
was like some tech, but not, it was like old school, like full
Right.
tech. It wasn't like steampunk tech.
Yeah.
And I like that too. And 12 also was, even with the spaceships, I'm sorry, even with the ships, they still were like 4 and 6 type ships. They weren't like modern ships.
Absolutely.
So maybe that's why we like all those, and maybe why I don't like 15 because they have like realistic type steampunk ships, and I'm like, I don't want to drive in a car.
Right? Like you can just get a driving game and drive a car.
I don't want to run around a city that looks like Venice. I want to like run around the wilderness and live off. They'd have camping, but they all have camping. You have to see it like you're camping, but they have like camping gear that's super expensive and like perfect tents and they have fancy food, which is not a bad thing. It's just like, it's very odd comparatively.
Right.
So odd. But I'm willing to give this game a shot. I just am not there yet and I'm determined to finish it regardless of my disinterest.
Right. Now, as you're playing the game, you've made no connection to the characters. I just want to
No.
make sure.
Yeah, no. I don't really. I told my friend I kind of like the guy with the glasses, and I'm like, it's probably bad that I can't even remember his name because
It's the guy with the glasses. Just call him
it's
Glasses.
his name is Ignis, and I had to look it up a few times. And the thing is, though, like that's the problem because I think about like 6 or 7 or 8, and I can name you every character, like their backstory, who they had connections to. Like I can remember all the stuff, and I right now could not name for you the four main characters of this game. And I've been playing it for like 15 hours, and I don't know their names.
Womp womp
I know,
womp.
but I might be alone in this world. I don't know. I've heard mixed things, but I think everyone should give it a try because it is fun. I'm enjoying it even if I'm not emotionally connecting to it. So at least it's not boring. It's not crazy like 13
Right.
that made no sense and was very pretty.
Now, if Square Enix, if they called you up and they said, Chelsea, we're making Final Fantasy 16. We've got a great story. We are confirming we've got a great story, but you need to fill in the blanks for battle system or for party dynamics or setting. What would you have it?
I have to say that, and it's so bad of me, but I actually like this fighting style. I'd be okay with sticking to something like this for fighting and not going back to like super turn based because I can still play that. But
Hmm.
I wouldn't mind keeping this kind of fighting system because now that I've been playing Assassin's Creed and Uncharted and all these games, I'm kind of used to like more fast paced,
Okay.
active fighting. So I would keep the battle system. I would want them to go back to more fantasy based, less steampunk based. And I think I just remind them that the story is number one. And if you can't emotionally connect somebody without needing previous material, then you're not doing your job well. They should, the Final Fantasy has managed to make people emotionally connect and feel something for characters that they've only known for an hour or two. It's happened. They're capable of it without any previous material, and they're clearly not doing it as well in this. So maybe go down to the basics and remember that a better story is really the heart of everything, and keep the battle system because I do think it'll bring in casual gamers that wouldn't feel comfortable in the turn based. Like I would think of somebody like Jaquel, who I love, but I can see her like preferring this style to old school Final Fantasy, and because she doesn't play a
Hmm.
whole lot of games, I think she would like this a lot more. The style. So I'd say if you want to do a modern, then maybe keep the fighting style and then just remember your roots and go from there. And, remember that there's characters and they have opinions and thoughts and feelings and they're not just running around making weird. There's at one point where one of the I mean, remember their city was just destroyed. The king was killed. A bunch of people were killed. The bad guys have taken over, and I'm running around the countryside, and they're like singing and talking as if nothing has happened.
Nothing has
And
happened.
I'm
Dun, dun,
going, anyone feel anything? Want to talk about it? No?
dun.
Okay. Do you remember those cutscenes where it was like 20 minutes of feelings?
Yep.
Haven't hit that point in this game yet.
What do you
Waiting.
mean you're not having like multiple feelings with different characters and bonding with them?
Nope. Zero.
Now, I do there is a comment that was made on I think is on your Facebook
Yeah.
or it might have been somewhere else where someone had suggested that they maybe go down the BioWare route and main character is up to you. You choose
Yes. Yeah.
male or female. Would you like that in the game, or
I
do you prefer the actual named characters with the stories? I mean, they could realistically do it. There's not much tweaking I think that they would need to do
Yeah, I mean
overall.
they could just go the BioWare route that way, which is what BioWare does. And but if you ask me, I prefer BioShock Infinite to BioShock. And part of that is because I like the main characters as they're written. So I like BioShock, but BioShock Infinite with Elizabeth and Booker, who are distinct characters, including Booker, who
Hmm.
you play as. that means more to me. So I would say, but what BioWare does well is that regardless of which gender you're playing, you're still playing Shepherd. So
Right.
gender doesn't matter. Shepherd is still Shepherd, so it works. So if they did do, you can pick whatever gender you want. They would just, need to have a character that could be anything, like could be all the things and just be different gendered or different race or look differently and just write a story that would be the exact same either way. I mean, by BioWare, when they did Knights of the Old Republic, remember that was when they did Knights of the Old Republic, that was actually kind of rare. What they were
Hmm.
doing was really rare. The concept of this storyline where you could pick any gender, anything you want, or any look or anything, and it's the same story, except if you make different choices. But like, they when that was I remember playing Knights of the Old Republic and thinking how weird it was that I could customize my own character and still lose nothing of the plot doing that. So, which was
Absolutely.
awesome. I mean, that's what makes BioWare amazing. So I'd say if Final Fantasy wants to do that, just take a cue from BioWare and make sure that the main character isn't just an empty avatar, but
Right,
has,
right.
a full storyline as if they were just a storyline that would work for any gender, race, or background. There you go. But I wouldn't mind. I think if they're gonna test things, they're trying out new things. Okay, like go ahead, give it a go, guys. I'll try it out if it looks interesting. But I am a little sad that this didn't turn out kind of the way I wanted it. But say la vie.
C'est la vie. And Final Fantasy VII will be coming
I'm
out
so
in the
excited.
future at some point.
Yes, I'm really excited about that. And Kingdom Hearts will be coming out 3 next year. So I'll have those to make me happy from Square. But
To tide you over. Yep.
exactly. And I really do hope, despite all my criticism, that it does well, that maybe new players do get involved and get interested in the series and try out the other games, maybe. That would be great. And so I fully support that. And if they all want to try 7 when it comes out, that would be even better. So I want them to succeed. I promise.
Absolutely. Yep. And next year, with it being the 30th anniversary, hopefully they'll have some either announcements or some
Oh, I hope
specials
so.
or
How great would it be if they did like 4 and 6 as real games like 7? That would be, I would just die. I would like fall over dead. And
that would be amazing.
enjoy. Like, hey guys, how about you not bother making new games that might not sell well and, go back to the awesome stories and characters that won you fans in the first place, and then it would be brand new to all these people who didn't have Nintendo services.
Yep.
I'm just saying, it would be great.
Just saying,
Just saying.
guys. Just saying.
Putting that thought into the abyss there.
All right. Well, for everyone that's listening, if you are keen about Chelsea and like what you've heard, she does have a blog
I'm
called Media Nerd Alert,
I'm very
and
behind it.
it's okay. You still put out more content than a lot of people do. And you can find it at medianerdalert.wordpress.com. And you can go back and listen to any of her numerous episodes now that Chelsea has claimed the throne at this point of being the most frequent, or the I guess the most frequent guest on this podcast at
Oh,
this
I'm
point with 4
sorry.
episodes now.
I'm sorry, everyone, if I am annoying.
No apologies necessary. Well, thank you so much, Chelsea, and I'll catch you later. And everyone else, have a great night.